everyone, this is a mini review on Dead Sea Climatotherapy. What inspired me to do this video is discrepancy between information from independent doctors and researchers and these associated with Dead Sea medical tourism. For instance, some researchers claimed that the remission time for psoriasis patients after 4 weeks of Dead Sea Climatotherapy was about 13 weeks, whereas researchers working in private clinics at the seaside claim that the time is about twice as long. Don't get me wrong, the Dead Sea has positive impact on health, especially skin. Dead Sea has been known from biblical times for its healing properties, and if you have financial means, then don't waste your time watching this video, just go to the Dead Sea. You will have great time bobbing on the water surface and your skin condition will improve. The question is, how long will the improvement last, and is there any substitute for the Dead Sea Climatotherapy for those who cannot afford it? So there are two main reasons why the Dead Sea has positive influence on patients' health. First, it is the exposure to the unique UV radiation present in the region. And secondly, Dead Sea water contains unusually high mineral content of a unique composition. This citation refers specifically to psoriasis patients. Most of the publications in this video refers to psoriasis to avoid too much variation and confusion. But I suppose you'll be able to draw quite a few parallel lines with other conditions, especially skin conditions. I will also like you to notice the name of Mr. Marco. As we'll soon see, he is associated with the Dead Sea medical tourism. So anyway, let's first focus on the unique UV solar radiation. Probably you know that skin conditions like vitiligo, psoriasis, eczema are often treated with UV light. Normally, they are treated with artificially produced UV. However, UV radiation reaching the Dead Sea region is also very suitable for the treatment. So what makes it so special? Seashore of the Dead Sea is located around 400 meters below the sea level, and in fact, it is the lowest point on land. And you might be like, wait, the level of the Dead Sea is the sea level. No, because the Dead Sea is actually a big lake. On the diagram we can see that the surface level of the Dead Sea is about 400 meters below the level of the Mediterranean Sea, which is a proper sea. So what? Well, UV rays has extra 400 meters to travel and scatter, and that leads to attenuation of some of the UV radiation. So quick recap, we have UVC, UVB and UVA. UVC is blocked by the ozone layer and so is part of the UVB. The attenuation is inversely proportional to the wavelength of the radiation. So the shorter UVB radiation, the one that causes erythema, that is skin redness, is attenuated much more than the longer wavelength therapeutic UVB. And this is the main reason why sunbathing at the Dead Sea is unique. This article claims that efficient therapy with natural UV light is not really possible in other parts of the world, except the Dead Sea region, because a patient would get burned before absorbing enough of the therapeutic UVB. Well, there were some trials on psoriasis patients getting heliotherapy, for instance on Canary Islands. After 4 weeks of heliotherapy on Canary Islands, a reduction in the PASI of at least 75% was achieved in 84% of the patients. In comparison, sun-only therapy of psoriasis patients at the Dead Sea led to 80 to 100% reduction in PSI in nearly half of the patients and less than 40% in less than 15% of the patients. The heliotherapy on the Canary Islands still gave significant improvement. Some psoriasis heliotherapy was even done at much higher latitude. However, please realize that sunburn must be avoided as it can flare up psoriasis, so it is crucial a doctor monitors how much UV a person with psoriasis is exposed to. So anyway, coming back to the Dead Sea, please remember that even there, UVA is not really attenuated, and UVA penetrates deeper into the skin than UVB, and so you cannot stay that long on the sun. In the old research papers, we read that patients were allowed to stay on the sun even for 6 hours per day, but nowadays it's maximum 3 hours and only after acclimatization. Also, sunbathing should be limited to early morning and late afternoon hours when the therapeutic part of the UVB is the most abundant. Before we move on, I need to mention one important thing. You might think that natural UV light is better than artificial UV light. Analogically to food, for instance, natural food is better than so-called artificial food. I don't have time to explain in detail, but this food analogy is not really applicable. However, the main benefit of natural UV, or if you like heliotherapy, seems to be that patient receives UVB in a relaxing environment. It is known that autoimmune skin conditions are linked to stress, depression, and anxiety. For instance, there was a research where psoriasis patients were receiving phototherapy while listening to meditation tapes, and according to the study, they had an increased rate of resolution of psoriatic lesions compared to patients that did not listen to meditation tapes during phototherapy. So phototherapy while chilling on a beach can lead to some better results. And lastly, climatotherapy at the Dead Sea allows you to combine heliotherapy with the Dead Sea baths. So let's move on to therapeutic properties of the Dead Sea waters. Dead Sea waters has anti-inflammatory and immunoregulating properties. It is said to be due to high concentrations of the salts and due to presence of some specific ions, like magnesium. Bathing in the Dead Sea has also calming effect due to elevated levels of bromide in the haze overhanging the Dead Sea. So let's focus on magnesium. Dead Sea water is particularly rich in magnesium ions. It contains almost 300 grams of magnesium chloride per kilogram of Dead Sea water. Here we see an article that shows magnesium ions regulates activity of Langerhans cells. Langerhans cells are immune cells, more specifically tissue-resident macrophages of the skin. Paper concludes that magnesium ions might contribute to anti-inflammatory properties of the Dead Sea waters. Please notice that sodium does not have these properties. So for instance, bathing in sodium chloride, common table salt, would not lead to the results magnesium chloride would give. This paper investigates influence of magnesium ions on patients with atopic eczema. Atopic eczema causes skin to be itchy, dry, and cracked. The study was randomized and so-called double-blinded, so neither the participants nor the researchers knew which treatment was being used. Participants were not allowed any treatment 3 weeks prior to the trial. In the study, one forearm was immersed in tap water and the other in 5% of Dead Sea salt solution for 15 minutes for 6 weeks. The study found that magnesium-rich Dead Sea salt improves skin barrier function, enhances skin hydration, and reduces inflammation of atopic dry skin. Having said that, the paper attributes all of these benefits to magnesium solely on the basis of previous research. One of them was performed on patients. Beneficial effects of magnesium ions applied locally to the skin of patients with contact dermatitis. This publication sadly is in German and therefore I cannot read it. So anyway, maybe instead of a single trip to the Dead Sea, regular baths at home with the Dead Sea salt or magnesium chloride as supplementary treatment will significantly improve quality of patients' life. Let's move on to bromides. The thick haze overhanging the Dead Sea is also rich in bromides. Inhalation of bromides, which have strong calming effect, improves the condition of psoriasis, especially among those whose disease is stress-related. However, please notice that bromides in high doses are toxic, and it contributes to the toxicity of the Dead Sea water and Dead Sea salt. This article describes Dead Sea water poisoning. One of the symptoms is central nervous system depression, probably caused by bromides. We read, most ingestions and aspirations were caused by patients accidentally slipping into the water or attempting to stand up after swimming. The adult mortality was 19%. 4 pediatric patients with variable degrees of intoxication survived. And just to reiterate, Dead Sea salt is not for cooking. Here's another article. It reports a 57-year-old man with Asperger syndrome complaining of diffuse pain. He revealed that he has been consuming 3 to 4 tablespoons of Dead Sea salt daily for several months. His bromide level was above 2.5 grams per liter of blood, with 1.5 grams being considered toxic. Well, fortunately, he had, or developed, very high resistance to bromide, but other people most likely would not be that lucky. Okay, so by now we have a vague understanding why the Dead Sea is unique, so let's move on to the controversy. The first question we can ask ourselves is whether is it the water or the UV radiation at the Dead Sea that has greater therapeutic effect. Now, before we dive into some publications, we need a little bit of nomenclature. Phototherapy, PT, is the use of UV radiation in a treatment of a disease, and some people make a distinction between artificial phototherapy, or just phototherapy, and natural phototherapy, also called heliotherapy. For the sake of sanity, we will treat phototherapy and heliotherapy as one and the same thing, even though, as I already mentioned in this video, that there is a different degree of psychological relaxation associated with each of these treatments. Balneotherapy, BT, is a treatment of disease by bathing in mineral-rich, natural waters. Combination of balneotherapy and phototherapy is often referred to as balneophototherapy, BPT. And finally, climatotherapy refers to temporary or permanent relocation of a patient to a region with a climate more favorable to recovery from or management of a condition. So when you go to the Dead Sea, you actually experience climatotherapy with natural balneotherapy and heliotherapy. But due to scarcity of well-designed publications, we will look at some other related treatments, like artificial phototherapy or, for instance, baths with the Dead Sea salt that were conducted not at the actual Dead Sea location, which might be called artificial balneotherapy. We will also look at treatments at other locations, for instance, spa waters in France. So coming back to our question, is the phototherapy or balneotherapy more effective? The earliest study I found is actually done in a clinic at the Dead Sea. It is non-randomized, meaning that the researchers performing the study had a control over which patient goes to which group. Although we read 3 treatment groups were deliberately balanced with each other so that the mean psoriasis area and severity indices PASI was similar. The finding was that for the patients bathing only in the indoor pools, the decrease in PASI was only about 30%. For the patients that only sunbathed, the decrease in PASI was about 75%, and those who had combined therapy, the decrease in PSAI was about 85%. 5 years later, another similar study was published, this time at the spa in France. The spa water alone gave again decrease in PSAI of about 30%. For phototherapy alone, the decrease was about 65%, and the combined therapy led to about 55% decrease in PASI. The fact that combined therapy had lower PASI decrease than the UV alone is puzzling, but the answer to this seems to be hidden in the research design. So instead of using the usual 15 minutes bath, a jet shower was used for 5 minutes at the pressure of 3 bar at a distance of 4 meters. Pressure of 3 bar, as I found out, is the maximum pressure of any home taps. The researchers justify this design, saying that it meant to remove hyperkeratotic lesions and scales, but instead it may have induced the Koebner phenomenon. Koebner phenomenon is when lesions appear in places where skin has been damaged or irritated. Please notice that in spite of, as it was found out, a bit unfortunate design of the second study, the decrease in PASI for patients who were treated with mineral water only is very similar in both studies, and at most twice as low compared to phototherapy. So now it would be a good time to take a look whether the baths improve the outcome of UV therapy and to what extent. In the first study, the enhancement was 10%. The publication with the jet shower shows that the bathing decreases the effectiveness of the UV therapy, but it is an outlier considering the next 3 publications that solely focus on the question how much the baths enhance phototherapy. First was done at the Blue Lagoon in Iceland. In the UV-only group, the decrease in PSAI was 60% after 4 weeks of treatment, and when the bathing was included, the decrease was 90%, making a quite big 30% decrease in PSAI. However, the authors point out that the Blue Lagoon is unique, obviously, and that one of the things that make it so unique is a specific type of algae, which I think is actually cyanobacteria. But anyway, when I type this name in the Google Scholar, few titles appear. The first is the publication we are talking about, and one of them does investigate the impact of cyanobacteria on psoriasis. But I think that is too much for me to dive in this one video. The article is free to access, so you can read it if you like. There is one more remark I would like to make about this study. It was referenced and criticized in another publication because no statistical comparison was performed to prove a significant difference between the two treatment groups. And of course, patients were not assessed by an investigator blinded from randomization. So anyway, the second publication, almost 10 years later, uses Dead Sea salt. The soaking was done only locally, that is, a patient immersed one forearm in Dead Sea solution and then both forearms were radiated with the UVB. It was found out that there is only a slight advantage of combining the therapies, and researchers concluded the difference is not clinically important. The authors, however, pointed out that if there are some additional benefits of soaking the entire body, then with this research design, it could not be detected. And indeed, it seems that there are some benefits of baths due to relaxation and heating of the entire body. In a different article, we read, the heat from thermal baths in balneotherapy stimulates the body to release small peptides that influence pain perception, and they also have immunosuppressive properties. Thus, the calming and therapeutic properties of balneotherapy on inflammatory skin diseases can be attributed to the thermal effect on skin. However, heated salt water baths can also provide the same effect. The placebo effect on balneotherapy can thus be profound and must be taken into consideration when evaluating clinical trials on balneotherapy and dermatologic disease. So anyways, let's move on to the last article from 2011. The difference between the balneotherapy and phototherapy was found to be 50%, which is huge. But please notice that in this particular study, patients who were receiving bathing were also receiving phototherapy at the same time. In all the previous studies, it was not the case. And again, the different design might significantly impact the results. So it's difficult to compare meaningfully these two research setups. And when I was reading this last article, I noticed that it was sponsored by a German health insurance company, and I was puzzled why they would sponsor this type of research, but somewhat I found that in Germany, where spas flourished for many centuries, use of balneotherapy has drastically declined. After the German Standing Committee of Statutory Health Insurance Physicians and Sickness Funds halted insurance reimbursement for the treatment in 2000. It was due to lack of consistent treatment guidelines and the dearth of randomized control trial data that might support the superiority of balneophototherapy over phototherapy. That makes more sense now, although probably it's my twisted mind overstretching facts. So to summarize, when you look at these 5 articles, when we exclude the local soaking and the jet shower article, which is probably a good idea, one can speculate that baths enhance phototherapy somewhere between 10 and 50%. So I hope that I showed you enough articles to make you realize there are so many factors that are important in this type of analysis, and even though I'm trying to show you the best design publications, it is still hard to compare them with one another. This quote is a good summary. It is difficult to extrapolate efficiency of balneotherapy on dermatologic disease with varying treatment regimens, hydrogeologic sources of the thermal spring waters, or any mineral waters as a matter of fact, mineral compositions, and mineral concentrations without head-to-head randomized placebo-controlled trials. Rigorous in vivo studies are required to verify the anti-inflammatory effects observed in vitro studies. Although some studies reported positive effects of balneotherapy on psoriasis, these clinical trials involved heterogeneous patients' populations, i.e. different disease severity, demographics, and disease types, different treatment regimens, lack of standardized criteria for measuring disease severity, and varying treatment durations. This is so true. So now I will show you a couple examples of publications with various shortcomings. The role of selenium in psoriasis. This study takes place again in France at a spa with waters relatively high in selenium. Where do I even start? Patients were taking 15 bar pressure showers. Standard water hose has pressure 10 bar. The distance between the patient and the shower was not specified, but still it seems to be big pressure. If you remember, Koebner phenomenon was already speculated about in the publication that used 3 bar showers. Also at the spa center where the 3 bar showers were used, the selenium content is about 7 times higher, and please recall that that publication concluded spa waters alone had a minor therapeutic effect on psoriasis. Let's move on. The results of the study are very good. So selenium does improve the state of patients with psoriasis. Well, hard to say. First of all, there is no control group. We read, the dramatic response was not felt to be compatible with the placebo effect. A few minutes ago, we looked at this passage. According to it, any hot bath would give an improvement in inflammatory skin diseases. Well, never mind. Secondly, the publication failed to find a correlation between the initial selenium level and the PASI score at the day 0. It's true that patients who responded to treatment had an increase in their plasma selenium level that's statistically significant, but that was not apparent in the non-responders. However, that is not statistically significant. I would not call these results conclusive, yet the publication only talks about selenium as a reason for improvement. Yes, but I'm sure that in the spa waters, there are high levels of other ions like magnesium that probably contributed to clearing of lesions. Only because you don't measure something, that does not mean it does not exist and affect the patients. I really cannot comprehend why, if the study wanted to measure the effect of selenium in vivo, the study is not designed as follows. A solution is prepared, say with 70 micrograms of selenium ions per liter. This is the concentration of selenium at the spa center, and then half of the patients would be taking baths or showers with the selenium and half with tap water, and then a more meaningful results would be obtained. Maybe it's not practically feasible, but I feel that in the history of science, there were much less feasible and more tedious experiments, and they got carried out. It's almost as if some publications just want to praise the waters at a particular spa and not really find out which factor helps. This brings us to another publication. After 4 weeks of chemotherapy at the Dead Sea, 3/4 of psoriasis patients experienced 75% reduction in PASI. All patients experienced at least 50% reduction in PASI, no control group. Let's just notice that one of the authors is Mr. Harari, and then let's look what the DMZ Medical Center is. Patients are being cared for and treated at DMZ, which is integrated into the Lot Spa Hotel. Founded in 1988, DMZ is a contract partner of the German statutory health insurances and various Austrian social insurance agencies. Our patients are being treated and cared for holistically by a primarily German-speaking team of doctors and therapists. Dr. Harari serves as the medical director at the DMZ clinic, and if you book online, you will get 5% off, just so you know. I'm only just trying to show that publications are written by people from different backgrounds and with different affiliations. The very last thing I would like to look at in this video is how long the therapeutic effects of the Dead Sea Climatotherapy seem to last, which brings us back to the first slide of the video. We saw that Mr. Harari's research claimed that the improvement lasts twice as long compared to this research from Denmark. So let's go into a bit more detail. Mr. Harari uses definitions from this article. This article tries to unify definitions about duration of improvement after certain psoriasis treatment. They set it as follows. Duration of therapeutic effect is defined as the time it takes to lose 50% of improvement obtained from treatment once the treatment is stopped. And that is what the figure A represents. Please notice this parameter can be defined for all patients no matter how much improvement they achieved as a result of treatment. They also defined relapse. We read, relapse can be defined only for patients who achieved at least 50% improvement in PASI score from baseline. For patients who achieve that, relapse occurs when the improvement in the PASI score falls below 50% from the baseline PSAI score, and that's what figure B represents. So now we have better understanding of the values Mr. Harari gives in his paper. On the other hand, the Danish publication measured the time from the end of the treatment to reappearance of visible skin symptoms, which is much more strict definition. I suppose that's mainly why the time is much shorter, only about 13 weeks. Also, the sample size in the Danish study is very small. 18 patients were sent to the treatment, but only 8 completed the follow-up. The authors were aware of these shortcomings and the fact that the study does not have a control group. Overall, they concluded that Sea Climatotherapy does improve quality of life, 88% reduction in the mean PASI, but in their opinion, they did not observe long-term disease control. They also tried to compare Dead Sea Climatotherapy to biologics, saying that Dead Sea Climatotherapy took effect faster, but the effect of biologics lasts longer. Harari replied, constructing a table that compares phototherapy, Dead Sea Climatotherapy, and biologics for psoriasis patients. In this article, he also estimates the cost of the Dead Sea Climatotherapy at about $6,000. Please notice that the article is from 2020. In comparison, for a psoriasis patient with moderate to severe disease, the cost of biologics is estimated to be about $30,000. Reference from 2017. Of course, the real cost difference depends how long does the effect of the Dead Sea Climatotherapy last and if the estimates are accurate, so effectively we are running in circles. Coming back to the two publications that address the question how long the effect of the Dead Sea Climatotherapy lasts, now we understand that these publications used very different parameters, hence they got very different results. I think it's good that the Danish research team performed this research, and I hope that more research of this type will follow, because although the Dead Sea Climatotherapy brings an improvement in psoriasis, conflicts of interest of the Dead Sea clinics is very apparent. I do not try to discredit findings of the Dead Sea clinics, but as we've seen, clinics or spa centers are not keen to design any research in a way that would allow to isolate a specific aspect of therapy and investigate it in detail. They simply investigate the whole package of treatment a particular clinic offers, often with little justification behind it. To sum up, phototherapy seems to be a more important factor than mineral water baths in treatment of psoriasis. However, mineral water baths do seem to have beneficial effect on psoriasis, so as I already said at the beginning of the video, if you have financial means, then trip to the Dead Sea is a good idea. If you don't have that option, then home baths with Dead Sea salt could be a good supplementary treatment to phototherapy. Just to remind you, please consult your plans of having Dead Sea salt baths with your doctor. Contraindications for mineral baths are, for instance, skin malignancies, acute skin infections, etc. And as a practical tip, at the end of your bath, you need to wash off the salt with tap water and lubricate your skin. So that's all I have for you today. I hope it helps. Bye!